Welcome back to Candid Conversations. I'm your host, Jonathan Youssef, and today we are sharing the second half of my conversation with Michael Keller. We'll pick up right where we left off, exploring spiritual leadership, practical outreach, real-life challenges facing believers today. Let's jump back in.
Yeah, they're related. And just off the top of my head,
Sure.
based on what you're saying, I think we're seeing a renewed, at least culturally, uh, it's not desire, I don't think, but I think there's a renewed interest in spiritual matters.
Yeah.
I think part of that probably might be the unrootedness and the change, the fast-pacedness, and AI bringing questions of, well, if AI is going to take my job, then who am I as a person? So there's all these big identity questions. So I think there's some benefits of in the discombobulation where people were so assured that they knew the answer to what it means to be human, which was to have fun and all the kind of stories that our culture tells us. Um, I think those things are cracking, or at least they're showing their cracks more. And I think so. I think
Yeah.
that's the benefit. I think the other side of it is now in a post-truth world, without a solid view of what it means to be human or American or whatever nationality that you are, you're just seeing more fracturing. And so there's a fracturing philosophically, ideologically, sorry. I mean, I don't know when people are going to listen or watch this, but we're talking the day after, uh, you had a Ukrainian immigrant stabbed and then a conservative pundit shot
Yeah.
to death. And like
All on the 24th anniversary of September 11th.
yeah, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. That's again, so you're just seeing such, and when you murder somebody, you're making the decision to, I think their life is forfeit and they no longer get to live here anymore. So that you have to make the assumption that you can see things of what somebody else is not just wrong or misplaced, but they don't deserve to live anymore. They're evil or not here. I mean, you're just seeing more of that because of the fracturing. We don't have the shared space of we're all in this together. And
Right.
so you're seeing people both move culturally away from each other. We're not talking to each other, but we're also now seeing violence or at least the justification of it. Now, those things are related. The idea of people wanting to come back spiritually, the fracturing that's happening. But what from your perspective, what do you see?
It's funny just talking about technology and artificial intelligence. To your point, there's this isolation that's taking place where people are not living out their existence in any sort of community. The community they're living it out on is a fake community that's digital, right? So you can pretend to be something that you're not. You're going to speak with a different boldness and arrogance, and
Yes.
you're going to say things that you wouldn't say to somebody's face across the table. For example, since you mention it, after this shooting that took place, I unwisely went onto social media, and then I started reading comments, and the vitriol.
Yeah.
It is I mean, I was getting upset, and then I thought I have to get out of here. So I'm mostly pretty much removed from social media. Occasionally, my team posts stuff. This is not a good plug for signing up for Candid, Twitter and Facebook. But the reality is, it's kind of dangerous. It's you go in there and then you find your own heart is being swayed and getting upset over different. Even language that people are using towards each other, but my response isn't my heart breaks for you. This person really just needs the gospel. Sometimes I'm like, I'm angry that they're even thinking that this would be justified. And then you read the comments of people who might even agree with me, and then their language becomes violent, and I think, what?
Yeah.
We've lost all sense of reality here. We have no sense of ability to have civil discourse with one another, which is, one of the things that I really loved about your dad and living in New York and his ability, because we visited Redeemer a number of times, even when I was younger and then as I got older and grew up. But to be in a city like New York, which is so different from the Deep South, but your dad's way of his ability, I haven't heard you preach, but I'm assuming you've got the
He's better.
same
Don't worry. He's
gifting and
better.
ability. You're just younger. You and I are just younger.
No,
We're
I don't
getting
know,
there.
man. I don't think we don't have to
But
dance around that. That's okay.
to have the discourse, to have the conversation, to be able to get people to think, to almost kind of just gently turn the head to look at something from a different angle and think, I never really thought about that. But we don't do that anymore
Yeah.
because we're not with each other. We're not, and this is why the gathering of the body, the gathering of the church is such an important thing, because you're not doing it digitally, in your isolated block where you can get all angry and then surround yourself with people who are angry just like you. You actually have to look at the Imago Dei of the person sitting across
Yeah.
from you and say, okay, maybe we do need to find a way of, having a conversation and talking about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you went to the theological point that I think Christianity has as one of our resources, which is the Imago Dei, that even if this person is a terrible person, whatever you think, they're still made in God's image. It was beautiful.
Right.
It's marred,
Mark. Yeah.
but still beautiful. It can bring us together. I think we're living in a culture where people don't have that assumption anymore, and it reminds me
Or
of
that
Jonathan.
people are beyond redemption. Like,
Yeah,
can this person be fine? They're marred
yeah,
and they don't have a renewed identity in Christ.
yeah.
But that doesn't mean that's not ever going to happen.
Well, there's all these statistics that say that, it used to be Democrats and Republicans would go to the same bars and they would, agree to disagree on things. And I
Yeah.
try to I try to form my kids. I say, guys, uh, uh, you can love somebody and not agree with them. The world will say you can't. You have to agree with them. And the world will also say disagreement is hate. I'm like, no, it's not. You can disagree and not hate, and you can love somebody and not agree with them. But we live in a
Yeah.
world where those things are gone now,
Compatible.
right?
Yeah. 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 That's what it feels like.
Yeah, and Jonathan Haidt wrote a book,
Mm.
The Righteous Mind, why good people are dividing by politics and religion, and are divided by it. And I think he goes through how politics have basically taken the space of religion.
Mm.
And so I think that's one of the problems. But then you brought up the social media part, like you're feeling this rage, and there's this book back in 2021 called "Breaking the Social Media Prism."
Mm.
Chris Bale, who basically showed that like 80% of content is written from the perspective of the 20% margins, the farthest ones, and
Yes. Yes.
online.
Yes.
And what it does is
Yeah.
it pulls people who might be like, well, I don't agree with them, but I'm not like an extremist. It's pulling people into these places because there's nothing rooting us in a different place.
There's nothing
So
central.
no,
It's the echo chamber kind of
yeah.
creation.
That is going back
Uh,
to AI for a second. There is one.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a futurist, but that one uh, thought I had is as more and more stuff online is being gonna be cultivated by AI, it's gonna be like just automated. I wonder if the internet will get ruined in a good way, in the sense of
Right.
it'll just be all these auto posts. Like, how do you know now that the post that the person wrote on Facebook about this sort of opponent, how do you know it wasn't just an AI bot that wrote it
Right.
to incite you to move you one click this way or that way? You're not going to be able to do that anymore. And I think people are going to get more and more, hopefully, realizing that this is just a vast wasteland, and maybe it'll bring us back offline to start talking to each other again. Maybe a brother can hope, but I don't know if that's
Well,
what will
it's either
happen,
that
but
or the
maybe.
Terminator
Yeah, I know. Yeah, or we're all, yeah.
or
That's the
Matrix
other
or something.
that's the other option. It's all over anyway. Good point.
um, well, you had mentioned the last time we were together last year, I think, and that your dad was working on, and I think this kind of ties in with what we're talking about. Your dad was doing some research before the Lord took him home on just how every culture has stories, and those stories kind of help create a framework for how you understand good and evil, and how we relate to each other, and a lot of these things. Tell us a little bit about that. I think maybe you're kind of finishing up the work, and hopefully that's something that will be coming out
Yeah.
before too long.
Well, yeah, it's before he died, we were gonna put out a book together, partly because he's been writing about this stuff like I've now through my research. He in his preaching book and his Making Sense of God book, he would always talk about these stories that culture has. But a lot of these
Mm.
places that he wrote about, it wasn't super accessible, wasn't the easiest stuff to read, and it wasn't in one
Right.
place. And what he found is through some of the his own way his mind works, kind of cultivating, figuring out culture, is that every culture has to answer questions for its people. Most of us
Yeah.
aren't intellectually asking why am I here and what's the point of life? But that's because culture has answered why are we here? What's wrong with us? What will put us right?
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
how will it put us right? How do we know this? Where do we go from here? And it doesn't communicate that through precepts. It communicates it through stories, through what moves our heart and stuff. And
Mhm.
Dad wrote a lot about this stuff, and what I've done over the past years trying to pull it together. And so we're going to co-write this book. It's going to come out next year. I can come and talk to you more about it then. But basically, he
Yeah,
walks
I'd love
through,
to have you back.
very simple phrases what we throw around these days, like "you do you." Well, that's actually an assumption of identity that it's not you do what your community tells you to do. That was a different traditions
Yeah.
or culture
Right.
story. You do
It's an
you is a very
individualistic
that's right.
mentality. Yeah. Mm.
But or be what you want to be. Follow your heart. I mean, what is
Follow
that?
your heart.
That is a very, very specific story of look inside. If you just look inside, you'll find the true you. Now,
Yeah.
I look inside and say, okay, who's the true Michael? Is Michael the one who wants to eat peanut butter brownies, or is Michael the one who wants to be fit and strong? And what is the true you? And I think there's an assumption by our culture that if you just look hard enough, you'll find the true version versus maybe multiple versions, like
Yeah.
Paul talking about the old self and the new self and lots of
Yeah.
different
Right.
places.
Yeah.
So I think there's these spaces for us to kind of ask ourselves, if you're a Christian listening right now, you could say, how much have I actually absorbed maybe my culture's view versus the Christian view? And maybe if you're not a Christian, you can ask yourself, is the thing that I'm swimming in, or the stories I'm around, are they actually satisfying and fulfilling me for, you know, or are they really working? Like the moral story in the West right now is that morality is relative, right? You do
Right.
you, but so you do you, but if you don't do it like me, we're going to cancel you. That's our view of
That's the
morality right
deal.
now. Isn't that
That's where
interesting?
we're
What we
going.
just talked about earlier.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, you do whatever you want, but if you don't do it the way I want, I'm doing, you're dead to
We're
me,
done. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Or
Isn't that
or I
interesting?
might possibly get rid of you.
Yeah, yes. And so, and what's going to stop that? So I think we're just in a space of these
Mm.
stories are around us, but they're not quite complete. And then maybe the Christian faith completes our stories. And because I think a lot of the stories we have today they used to be Christian stories that have been sort of defanged and taken key elements out of them. And I think we need to kind of find their origin and its place again. So that's what the that stuff's about. But I really, around New York, we see these things all the time. Like if I just work hard enough, if I just make enough money, it's a happiness story that our world
Right.
tells us. Well, if you just get enough stuff, people, places, and things, then you'll be okay. And the truth
Yeah.
is that really going to work?
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you seen those in your world?
Well, funny. I wonder if the shift is moving from with as the generations kind of transition from stuff to experiences.
Hmm.
So this
Which is
is
still
what
a
I
stuff though, right? Like
which is still
traveling is,
stuff. It's a consumption, but
yeah.
it is this. It's the new status symbol, right? It's like,
Mm,
where have you been? You don't even have to stay in the exotic 5-star resort. You could be staying in a youth hostel, but did
right.
you go to that place and have that experience? And that experience will shape who you are and show people that you're kind of an accomplished, world traveler or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um,
It's still consumption, right? It's still trying to fill you. If I just have this,
Still
if I
consumption.
do van life, right? If I just travel the world in my van and I have all these pictures, I show them on Instagram, and then you can have some great stories and change. Your perspective will change. It'll be helpful. I don't think
Yeah.
that's the key here. We're not saying this is all bad, this type of
Right. No,
stuff,
no. Yeah.
but
Don't go
it's
live on the
incomplete. Is
mountain
that going
like
to be enough? Are you going to feel like you know who you are from just having those travel experiences? I would argue
yeah.
that it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, even the new advertising for one of the groups, Airbnb or whatever it is not just go and stay at a place, but actually have an experience. So stay
Yeah.
in a house that's owned by a guy who runs a restaurant. He'll cook you
Mm,
food, and you'll take pictures of it.
yeah.
Um, I don't know.
So,
I mean, yeah, it
what do
feels
you
like we're
mean?
spiraling out of control. And the good news is, the
I
gospel
think it's an
gives us a
opportunity,
different
but
story.
that's an opportunity for the church.
Exactly.
If things are speeding up, like you said, if things are fracturing out, like we said, if these stories aren't enough, if we're hopping from, at least in America, you had one ideology that was in charge of most of the media and politics, and then another now ideology has kind of replaced it. And then you see these pendulum swings. I think 5 to 15 years, you're just going to see it swing again. I, it leads to with AI going around, it's going to lead to questions of like, well,
Yeah.
is this all?
Exactly.
Is this it? And I think there's an opportunity if we can forgive and repent, if we can be a place where we actually
Yeah.
uh, can make reconciliation happen, where we actually make a way forward, have real change, not just surface stuff, but real change. I think there could be a place where this world sees that there's some real cash flows, but there's real resources in Christianity that because it actually is true, not because it just works. I think Dad reminds me of a phrase my dad once said. Christianity is not um, true because it works. It works because it's true. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be really cool hopefully when people see that.
Yeah, and this kind of takes us to another thing we can talk about, which is how do churches be equipped to give those answers? So with things changing,
Mm.
I even think about obviously people are looking for a sense of identity. You've seen there's been this kind of sexual identity revival with sort of the pan gender things
Mhm.
going on, trans and the thing for me is how is the church not going to respond to the cultural argumentation, but really the next thing needs to be how's the current church going to welcome these people who come in and go, I went down all these paths and they just didn't give me what I was looking for. What do you have to offer? And then to
Yeah.
present, not that everyone's going to come and go, this is it, but there will be a lot who will come in and say, the world told me this. How are our churches not going to be so offended by people who
Mm.
have made bad choices? Because really, that's what the church is just filled with. But
Mm.
but especially with those kind of hot button issues, sexuality and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and then have a space for them to come in and say, "Wow, man, this is completely different. This is not what I thought Christianity was. This is not who I thought God was. And you're presenting
Yeah.
this whole new thing, and there's changes beginning in my life because
Well, I heard two questions in there. One is what's the church going to do to, meet people who've had this kind of experience? I've tried everything and it's not going to work. And then another one, which is what about people inside the church? How do you form them with the expectation
yes,
to that whatever expectation they have of their cookie cutter model of what the church is, how do they actually embody the true, historic Christian church, right? Those are two
right,
different questions in some
exactly,
ways. I'd love to know
exactly.
your thoughts on them. Off the top of my head, I think we have to be very careful. That it's very easy to do the same thing the world does, which is say, well, yeah, the world's bad out there. We're good in here, and they're the licentious one. We're the moral ones. I think we need to do what I think Christianity always does, which is we're not saying you should be an antinomian, like, and that's a fancy
Right,
word for like, you do
anti-law.
you,
Yep,
whatever you
yep.
want. But we also don't want you to be a Pharisee and you earn your faith through your righteousness and through all your right standing. I think we have to show folks there's that I know some people don't like this, but I think the religiosity for the sake of it is just as problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And really the center has to be on grace, that you're not when people come in from a really hard background, you don't say just be a moral person, then you'll be okay. I think you need to say, listen,
Right.
you can fall away from God by trying to through your morality because you're trying to earn your salvation. And you can
Mm-hmm.
fall away by all the stuff that you already tried and you did.
Right.
Um but we really want to show you that it's all grace, that you were that bad that Jesus had to die for you, but you are that love that he was willing to. And
Mm.
if you put your trust in him, that doesn't mean you're not going to mess up. Doesn't mean the world's not going to mess up on you, but your life can be different. So I think that's
Yeah.
right. I mean, what would you
That's the
say?
timeless. Yeah, absolutely. That is the message of the gospel. And I think sometimes, when we speak of churches, it's very broad, right? But I think churches can quickly find something else that they think is the most
Yeah.
important thing,
Right.
uh, morality or whatever it is, and grace kind of quickly takes a back seat. Oh yes, of course
Oh, we
we
believe
believe
that.
in
Yeah.
grace. We
Yeah.
needed that, but it's like grace at conversion and then it's gone. They used to call it the grace law grace sandwich or law grace law sandwich. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
we how do we be people who are grace saturated?
Well,
It'll be countercultural.
but then actually that starts answering the second question. Your answer is great because w- when I was up in Boston, I was in my 20s and I remember, so this is actually, 20 years ago, but there was somebody who had transitioned from and then detransitioned.
Yep.
And but obviously because of the surgeries and things that they went through, um, you
Yeah.
know, didn't have the common of one
Sure.
thing or the either being more feminine or more masculine. There was just
Yep.
things like that. And then what did the church do to kind of welcome people who don't fit the kind of typical religious kind
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
look? I think the answer needs to be the church, the people inside church need to deeply understand their own need and their own brokenness, and they might not look like something on the outside. That doesn't mean
Right.
that it's not real on the inside. So there needs to be. People always say, "Oh, that's bad news. Like that's low self-esteem." I'm like, no, no, no. It leads to
Mm-hmm.
feeling more loved and cared for, knowing that this even before you realize that you were that messed up, Jesus died on the cross for you for that. So I
Mm-hmm.
do think that your ability to accept people who look different, act different, might not have it all put together, be
Mm-hmm.
broken messes, will be to the degree that you understand that you are as well. And
Yeah.
when you realize that you are and yet you are saved and loved, you're going to then save and love other people. This is what I
That's
tell
right.
people in my church. If the core of Christianity is a man who dies for his enemies, and you put him at the core of your life, you're going to die for yours, whoever
Yeah.
that is. It's just the
And
key.
you were one of those enemies, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's interesting your answer. You were already starting to answer that it has to be that self-realization.
Mm. Mm. Well, tell us a little bit about Lincoln Square, Redeemer Lincoln Square.
We're a church that's one of the Redeemer churches. We have a network of churches now. We have about six of them now. When Dad died, there was three.
Yeah.
We now have six,
Oh,
and
that's great.
it's in the Lincoln Square neighborhood, which is where Lincoln Center is, which is the arts community. And we've been there for about 8 years. And one of our values is we value questions and those who ask them. We do Q&A after every service where people text in questions. We do
Excellent.
that because everybody has a phone these days, and it lets people ask questions anonymously. And we found,
Yeah.
surprise,
Yeah.
surprise, Christians have as many questions as
Questions.
non-Christians. Yep.
Yeah.
And our theology tells us there's always there's
A space
the
for that, right?
not just the space for it, but Paul even says, put off the old
Encourages
man,
it.
put on the new man.
Yeah.
There's always that person inside of you that
Mm-hmm.
might have questions that there needs to be space to. We're not afraid of that because you're not saved by your right theology. You're not saved by
Yeah.
having it all put together. You're saved by grace. And it's if faith is trust, you put your trust by in Him, but it doesn't mean you can't ask those questions. So that's just some of our postures and things that we do.
Yeah, that's a theme that comes up on this podcast quite a lot, actually. A friend of mine, David Robertson, who tells the story of when he was doing a book signing for one of his books, which is questions and answers, right, for Christians. And he talks about a young girl who came up and balled up her question into a little piece of paper and kind of slid it into his hand, and he unwrapped it. It was her email address with her question. And he says, my conclusion was that I think she was embarrassed to ask the question in front of her dad because it implies, oh my gosh, my daughter doesn't know, or she's doubting, or she's asking these
Yeah.
questions and something's wrong. I need to fix it. And it's like, you need to have that space to be able to feel
Yeah.
comfortable to ask the question and not feel shame and guilt, but because we're
Yeah.
we're learners, right? We're disciples, and disciples
Yeah.
are gonna have questions.
We still do a printed bulletin because again, I think sometimes for non-Christians coming in, the idea of just looking at a screen, just could be there's a safety in kind of going like
Mm,
this. But in our
yeah,
bulletin, in the margins for all of our order of service, we put a little explainer about what's going on because we make the assumption
hmm
that they don't
you
know
don't know.
like what's confession, is this
Yeah,
beating yourself up time? A little phrase just says This is a time where we're honest about ourselves to God. This is where we're honest to God and ourselves about who we are. Like, it's just something small, but people, oh, that's what that is.
But extremely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, and I've heard Christians come up to me and say, yeah, hey, I didn't know that. Thank you. Thanks for putting it in there,
Yeah.
because I think we live in a world where I think Christians don't feel like they have to be experts in their faith. And therefore that stops them from going out and talking about their faith because they're like, well, I'm not an expert. So who am I? Not
Right.
realizing that Jesus created fishers of men out of
Right.
fishermen
Exactly.
who didn't
From
probably know
Galilee.
that. Yeah, they didn't know the full nature of the Trinity or how it worked together in 3 and 1 and 1 and 3, but they could still tell people how much that they were loved and saved by Jesus. So
Yeah.
I think that's what excites me, is to do that with people here in New York.
I love that. I think that's such an encouraging word for any church leader or pastor who's listening to this. Being aware of thinking of the person who's coming in who knows nothing, and thinking about your own people who think they know lots, but maybe haven't had the space to ask good questions.
Well, that and you don't have to have all the answers yourself. Like, you really,
Right.
this goes back to the very
Yeah.
first thing. I wasn't saved because of the right distillation or the right answer of what the gospel was. As much as I love that, I had that in my background, I still, and again, I mean, we could probably talk all day about our growing up as pastors' kids and stuff and whatnot.
Right.
But that's what's so cool, is that despite the beauty and the brokenness around us that have formed us who we are, we get to kind of just be fully who we don't have to be more than what we are. God's going to use that in the lives of others. So if I can say that to a pastor who's sane, but I can say that to anybody who's not, right? I mean,
Yeah.
wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm fully on board. Well, this has been fun, Michael Keller. I'm so glad we were able to schedule this time. We've talked about so many different things, but I think that's why we call it Candid Conversations and not one topic. It's been a pleasure to have some time with you and hear your heart. Our prayers are with you and Redeemer Lincoln Square Church. We pray that the Lord would continue to use you as you proclaim the word and as you reach out into that community. And the Lord bless your work and your book and all the things that are coming forward. It's been such a privilege to have you on Candid Conversations.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for having us. Like you, as your title says, I love that you're creating spaces for that in a fracturing world. These things are more important than ever to have these convos and spaces where we can kind of think through these big things that are going on. And so I'm thankful to be part of it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for joining us on Candid Conversations. For more interviews, subscribe and stay connected as we explore the Christian faith lived out together. Please take a few moments to complete our listener survey. Your feedback helps us build meaningful episodes for our Candid Conversations community, rooted in wisdom and hope found in Christ. See you next time.